Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
The 2024 Indigenous Media Conference, organized by Indigenous Journalists Association, took place from July 25 to 27 in Oklahoma City, United States. The event brought together Indigenous journalists, media professionals, and experts from around the world to discuss and address the pressing issues faced by Indigenous media practitioners. The conference also provided an opportunity to celebrate their contributions and achievements. Cultural Survival was also present at this landmark event and asked Indigenous journalists to share their experiences, challenges, and successes in covering Indigenous communities and their efforts in collaborating for Indigenous rights.
My name is Frank Blanquet. I am Yucatec Maya, and I run a television network called FNX, First Nations Experience Television. I think it's important for us as Indigenous communities to really be in charge of our narratives, be in charge of the stories that are being told about us, because without that authenticity, we don't know how accurate those stories are. So that's why it's important for us to really take the reins of our storytelling. I think they're told from an outsider perspective, and I also think there's a little bit of sensationalism that happens. You know, a lot of times these organizations come to our communities and tell stories when they're negative stories. They're not telling the positive stories. There's a lot more positive stories that are happening in our communities than there are negative stories, and there are tragic stories. And I think that accuracy and that authenticity that is missing also plays a part in the stories that they want to tell. There's a narrative that they want to keep, and we need to change that narrative. So our station was actually launched through the San Bernardino Community College District. We're part of a school district. We're also part of the PBS broadcast system. KVCR is our parent company. That's where we get our PBS affiliation. And we had worked on a series of documentaries with a local tribe called the Seminole Band of Mission Indians down in Southern California in San Bernardino. And based on those documentaries that we worked on, we started to think of, well, what would a station look like that has nothing but Indigenous content? And so I put together a video of a mock-up of what a station would look like. And the leadership team at the time met with the Seminole tribe, and they gave us the grant. They gave us a $6 million grant to launch the station. This is in 2009, and the station launched in 2011. But our station could not have happened. It was launched in partnership with the Seminole Band of Mission Indians. We are our own independent station. We operate independently from any tribal organization, but we could not have existed without that initial investment from one of our local tribes. We put the microphone to the community, and there's so many different communities, right? And those partnerships, we formed a partnership with Cheyenne and Arapaho Television, who was broadcasting locally out of Concho, Oklahoma. We formed a partnership with Gila River Broadcast when they launched out of the Gila River Reservation. We formed a partnership with Mississippi Band of Choctaw, with Akwesasne TV. And so those communities were already building stories, and we're a national venue for those stories. But also we travel to different communities, and really we don't try and tell our version of their story. They tell their story the way that they see fit. And I think that is what sets not just FNX, but all Indigenous media apart, is that they really try and tell or portray an authentic voice from Indigenous communities. When we think on a global scale, you know, journalism in some countries is a very dangerous job. And I think a lot of us worry about our youth in some countries going into journalism, because a lot of times their lives are in danger. Here in the U.S., I think in recent times, especially Indigenous journalists, you know, there are times where they are really challenged by authorities, whether it's police or federal government. We saw a lot of that at Standing Rock with arrests. See a lot of these at protests, and but I think our youth is really unique in that they understand some of the issues that we're going through at a very, very young age. And I think people outside of our indigenous communities learn about those at a later age. Maybe they don't learn about that until college, And I think that there's a worry that we have from our communities as especially outside the U.S. where journalism is a dangerous job. But here in the communities that we're representing, I think we really push our Native youth to help us tell these stories, because they are the future. Not only are they the future, they are the right now, as one of our speakers said earlier, Darren Brown. But we just have to. I mean, they know how they are consuming content, right? The way they consume content, our youth, is different than the way we consume content when we were younger. And I think that there is some sort of interest in creating similar content that in the way that they are consuming it. And whether it's short TikTok content, Instagram content, YouTube content, I think that interest can be, if it's not there, it can be nurtured, because there's stories that nobody else is telling in the way that they should be told. I really love the idea of indigenous communities worldwide coming together for the benefit of storytelling from our communities, because we have a lot of differences, but a lot of times we have more similarities than we have differences, and we have a lot of similar struggles. A lot of the boarding school system that we went through here in the Americas, other countries went through. Their Sami communities went through them, and we have Maori communities that went to them out of New Zealand, and so. Those similarities that we have really outweigh the differences that we have. And from a cultural standpoint, we're so different, but I love learning about all these other indigenous communities. And I think that is like, if as we come together as an indigenous community, celebrating each individual's community's indigeneity, I think it really makes for interesting content. And I think it's not communities within themselves, like indigenous communities within themselves, that want to learn about this. I think the general public wants to learn about the indigenous communities worldwide.
For more information on indigenous rights, visit ces.org/rights, and also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook.